I mean, you know what is really crazy to me about how we usually talk about financial success?
Oh, what's that?
Well, we always seem to demand this like really clean narrative. It's like we need the stock market to read like a children's storybook or something.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly.
You buy a stock because the company has this visionary Steve Jobs type CEO, or they just released a groundbreaking product.
Right. And then some analyst goes on TV, points at a chart going up and says, look, there it is, cause and effect.
Exactly. We desperately want the world to make sense, especially the world of money.
Yeah, it's deeply comforting. We want it to be driven by visible, understandable human actions. Like, company builds a better mousetrap, company makes more money, stock price goes up.
It's a neat little logical progression.
It is. But then, you step into the world of quantitative trading, high-frequency algorithms.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
And suddenly that neat little cause and effect machine is it's just smashed to pieces.
Completely. The traditional explanations just vanish.
Right. We're looking at a financial landscape that is honestly completely murky. It's a black box.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. Because today, we are not just looking at a timeline of financial return.
No, definitely not.
We are doing a real narrative-driven exploration of, well, a modern-day Midas, Jim Simons.
Jim Simons, yeah. The legend.
And we're pulling from some incredible sources for this, like Gregory Zuckerman's book, The Man Who Solved the Market, plus various biographical essays and historical archives.
It's a lot of material to go through.
It is. But the goal is to unpack the human being behind what was essentially a $100 billion money-making machine.
$100 billion. I mean, it's the absolute definition of informational muddy waters. And that is exactly where the greatest fortune in the history of modern finance was built.
Yeah, we are looking at a man whose flagship Medallion fund generated 66% average annual returns.
For over 3 decades.
I really need you listening to just pause on that for a second so you can fully grasp the gravity of that number, 66%.
Great.
Every single year.
Over 30 years?
Like, if you put $100 into a standard index fund, maybe it doubles in a decade,
Would
right?
you lucky, yeah.
But if you put it into this fund, it spirals into an absolute empire.
And he achieved this staggering historic success without fundamentally knowing a single thing about traditional finance.
Which is the craziest part.
He didn't care about the CEO. He didn't care about the new product launch. He didn't care about the quarterly earnings report at all.
He just shattered the entire illusion of Wall Street. Which makes you ask, was his ultimate success a product of his raw intelligence or his stubborn refusal to accept the rules everyone else played by?
That's the core question, isn't it?
Yeah. And to understand how this guy broke the market, we first have to understand how his incredibly unique brain broke down the universe itself.
You have to go way back.
Right. Long before he ever looked at a stock ticker. We need to go into the mind of a 4-year-old child obsessed with infinity.
Yeah, so we're talking about Jim Simons, born in 1938 in Brookline, Massachusetts.
Brookline, okay.
He grew up in a fairly standard middle-class American Jewish family. His father owned a shoe factory.
Right.
But from a very early age, Simons exhibited this relationship with numbers that was, frankly, alien to everyone around him.
Yeah, there's this amazing story from when he was just 3 years old. A literal toddler.
Oh, the division story.
Yes. His parents walked into a room and found him sitting there just mentally dividing numbers by 2.
Which is already weird for a 3-year-old.
But he wasn't doing simple stuff like 10 divided by 2. He started at 1,024.
Wow.
And he was just halving it all the way down in his head. 512, 256, 128.
Which is an astonishing cognitive feat. I mean, most kids at 3 are struggling with, like, spatial awareness and basic vocabulary.
Well, exactly.
And he's intuitively running geometric progressions.
Yeah.
But the defining moment, the spark that really illuminates how he perceived reality happened when he was 4 years old on a family drive.
Oh, I love the gas tank story. Let's get into that.
Yeah, so his father pulled the car over to fill up with gas, and little Jim, sitting in the back seat, was completely baffled by the concept of a gas tank ever running empty.
He just couldn't wrap his head around why they needed to stop.
Right.
Wait,
Yeah.
I want to explore his 4-year-old logic here because it is mathematically profound.
Really is.
He figured that if the car used up half of the gas in the tank, there would be another half remaining, right?
Naturally.
And then as you keep driving, you use half of that remaining half, which leaves an even smaller half.
Exactly.
And you just keep having the remaining gas forever. You never actually hit zero.
He had intuitively, completely independently, grasped Zeno's paradox.
Which is just wild. I mean, Zeno's paradox is a concept conceived by ancient Greek philosophers to explain the illusion of motion, and he's deriving it in the backseat of a Ford in 1942.
It shows a mind that is naturally predisposed to thinking about limits.
Yeah.
Infinite series, the hidden structures beneath everyday reality.
Yeah, like normal people look at a gas gauge and just see full and empty.
But a 4-year-old Jim Simons looks at a gas gauge and sees an infinite sequence of fractional steps approaching a limit. That is a fundamental difference in perception.
And that intellectual velocity, it didn't slow down as he grew up, it just accelerated.
Oh, absolutely. He blew right through the standard educational timeline.
He finished his undergraduate degree in mathematics at MIT in just 3 years, right?
3 years, yeah. Then he heads over to UC Berkeley, and he earns his PhD in mathematics at the unbelievably young age of 23.
23. I was barely functioning at 23.
Right. And he did it under the supervision of this renowned mathematician, Bertram Costin.
Okay.
But even then, Simons wasn't just a compliant student taking notes. Against his advisor's explicit advice, he tackled a problem in the geometry of multidimensional curved spaces.
Multidimensional curved spaces, just casual light work.
Exactly. But this was a problem that had defeated seasoned, tenured mathematicians for years.
And his advisor basically told him, don't touch that. It'll ruin your career. It's unsolvable.
Right. And Simon solved it in 2 years.
Unbelievable. But, I don't want us to paint this picture of a guy who is just a purely abstract thinker, locked in a dusty library surrounded by chalkboards.
Oh, not at all.
Because he wasn't a shut-in. He had this deeply rebellious, adventurous streak.
That's a crucial piece of his psychology. Like, after graduating from MIT, right before he fully committed to the rigor of his PhD, he bought a motor scooter.
A motor scooter?
Yeah, and he rode it all the way from Boston, Massachusetts down to Bogota, Colombia.
I'm still trying to process the logistics of that. Just a casual scooter ride down the Pan American Highway in the 1950s?
It's insane.
That's thousands of miles across borders, mountains, jungles, on what is essentially a glorified Vespa.
It paints a picture of a guy who is profoundly comfortable with risk. He's willing to venture into the unknown, to step entirely outside the prescribed safe path.
Yeah, he clearly trusts his ability to navigate chaotic, unpredictable environments.
And this rare combination, this extreme mathematical rigor, combined with an appetite for unconventional risk-taking, it eventually led him to the Institute for Defense Analyses.
The IDA.
Yeah, in Princeton, New Jersey.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because this is during the height of the Cold War, and this is where the story shifts from academic math to high-stakes espionage.
It really does.
He's recruited into the shadowy world of government intelligence, and his task is cracking Soviet codes for the National Security Agency.
Right, and the IDA was the perfect crucible for Simons. It's vital to understand what code breaking actually is at that level.
It's not just puzzle solving.
Exactly. It wasn't just about doing advanced calculus on a blackboard. It was about finding hidden states in seemingly chaotic, incredibly noisy data.
Right, because when the NSA is intercepting Soviet communications, they aren't getting clean data. They aren't getting a perfectly typed Russian document handed to them.
Not at all. You're getting static, deliberate obfuscation, scrambled frequencies, and random atmospheric noise.
Just a mess.
It looks and sounds like absolute chaos.
Yeah.
Your job is to find the mathematical pattern hidden beneath that chaos.
I've always thought about code breaking at that level. Like, imagine trying to listen to a single beautiful symphony while standing in the middle of a Category 5 hurricane.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right, because if you just use your ears, if you just rely on human intuition, it is pure deafening noise. The wind is howling, trees are snapping, you can't hear the violins at all.
Right.
But if you have the exact right mathematical filter, suddenly the hurricane just drops away, the noise is canceled out, and the melody appears.
That is a phenomenal analogy because the melody is always there, the structure exists, it's just buried.
Yeah. Is this the moment his brain gets permanently wired to see the world as a series of decryptable signals?
I think so. At the IDA, Simons worked closely with another brilliant mathematician named Leonard Baum. And Baum was developing what would become known as the Baum-Welch algorithm, which is a critical foundational component of something called Hidden Markov Models.
Okay, wait. Hidden Markov Models, I need you to break this down for me and for everyone listening, because this concept seems to be the linchpin for literally everything he does later in finance.
It absolutely is.
So what exactly is a hidden Markov model?
Okay, let's start with the basic Markov model. It's a way to describe a system that transitions from one state to another where the future state depends solely on the current state, not on the past.
Give me a real-world example of that, something simple.
Think about the weather, but, simplify.
Sure.
If today is sunny, there might be a 70% chance tomorrow is sunny and a 30% chance tomorrow is rainy. The prediction for tomorrow only cares about what the weather is doing today.
Okay.
It doesn't care what the weather was doing 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
That's a basic Markov chain.
Got it. The present state dictates the probability of the immediate future state.
Exactly. Now, a hidden Markov model is used when the actual states of the system, the things actually driving the changes, are invisible to you.
They're hidden.
They are hidden. But you can see the outputs or the emissions generated by those hidden states.
Okay, so in the context of the Cold War, you can't see the Soviet general in Moscow issuing the order. You can't see the actual state.
Right. You can't see the general. You can't see the original message. You can't see the encryption machine. All of those are hidden states.
Right.
But you can see the scrambled radio frequencies bouncing off the atmosphere. Those are the emissions, the visible data, the noise.
So the math allows you to look at the visible noise and basically infer backwards to figure out what the hidden state must be.
Precisely. You calculate the statistical probability of what unseen reality generated the noise you are currently observing.
Wow.
And this academic collaborative environment at the IDA was focused entirely on cracking these completely unsolvable puzzles using raw computational power and probabilistic models.
So it was basically a training ground.
Exactly. This exact framework became the blueprint Simons would later use to build Renaissance technologies. He wasn't learning anything about stocks or bonds at the IDA. He was learning how to manage eccentric genius and how to mathematically extract a signal from a sea of noise.
So his brain is now permanently wired to view the world as a series of decryptable signals.
Yeah.
He's thriving. He's doing highly classified vital work. He's really found his intellectual home.
He has.
But then, just as he hits his stride, his fierce independence, that rebellious scooter riding streak, collides head-on with the military-industrial complex.
And it leads to a spectacular fall from grace.
The abyss.
The abyss. So the year is 1967. America is deeply embroiled in the Vietnam War.
Right.
The political climate is incredibly tense, and the country is fracturing along ideological lines. Now, Simon's boss at the IDA is General Maxwell Taylor.
Okay.
And Taylor wasn't just any boss. He was a highly decorated military leader and a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
A heavy hitter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Taylor publishes a piece in the New York Times Magazine strongly defending the Vietnam War and advocating for its vigorous prosecution.
And Simons, who was staunchly opposed to the war, reads this. And he doesn't just disagree quietly at the water cooler with his buddies.
No, not Simon.
He writes a scathing public response to the New York Times.
Which is just absolute career suicide when you work for a defense contractor and your boss is a powerful general.
Totally. He argued that the political gains of a military victory in Vietnam couldn't possibly offset the enormous economic, intellectual, and moral investment that was being wasted.
Right.
He explicitly wrote that it would make America far stronger to rebuild the Watts neighborhood in Los Angeles or to fix domestic transportation than to bomb Hanoi or defoliate the farmlands of North Vietnam.
It was a deeply held moral conviction for him, and he refused to compartmentalize his ethics from his employment.
Yeah.
He even took it a step further. He told a Newsweek reporter who was interviewing him about the anti-war movement that he was essentially going on strike.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He said he was only going to work on his own personal mathematical research on the IDA's dime until the war ended.
I mean, you can't really tell the military you're just going to use their resources for your own hobbies.
Unsurprisingly, no.
Naturally, in 1968, he was fired. I escorted out of the building.
This dismissal forced a massive pivot. He was suddenly a mathematician without a home, so he went back to academia.
Back to the classroom.
He became the chair of the mathematics department at Stony Brook University. And keep in mind, he was only 30 years old.
Still so young.
Over the next decade, he built an incredibly prestigious department there from scratch. He recruited world-class talent.
And he also does some of his most famous theoretical work during this period, right?
Yes, he does. He co-developed what are known as the Chern-Simons invariants with an older, legendary mathematician named Shan Chern.
Okay, I'm going to need you to translate Chern-Simons invariants for me.
It's a complex topology. Simply put, it's a way of mathematically measuring and classifying three-dimensional spaces that twist and curve in unusual ways.
Okay, twisting spaces.
At the time, it was purely abstract geometry. Simons thought it was just a beautiful piece of math with absolutely no real-world application.
Just math for math's sake.
Right. But decades later, theoretical physicists realized that the Chern-Simons invariants perfectly described the behavior of subatomic particles.
You're kidding.
No, it became foundational to string theory and quantum computing.
That is just mind-blowing. He creates a math formula just for the beauty of it. And 30 years later, physicists realize it explains the fabric of the universe itself.
It's incredible. He actually won geometry's highest honor for this, the Veblen Prize.
So he is at the absolute pinnacle of academia.
He is.
But then he gets restless again.
The scooter rider returns.
Right.
In 1978, at the age of 40, he walks away from his tenured, prestigious academic throne.
Just leaves it.
He leaves it all behind to start a trading firm called Monometrics. And he sets up shop, not in a sleek Manhattan skyscraper, but in a ramshackle strip mall on Long Island.
At 40 years old, most people are settling into their careers, right? And he's starting over in a strip mall.
Yeah.
And this is where he hits a new, even darker abyss. Because you'd think, okay, the smartest math guy in the world is going to immediately dominate the stock market.
You would think that.
But that is not what happens at all.
Not at all. Early on, Simons tried to trade like everyone else. He engaged in discretionary trading.
Which means what exactly in his case?
It means he was reading the news. He was looking at fundamental economic indicators. He was trying to predict currency movements based on global political events.
Oh, like standard Wall Street stuff.
Exactly. If he thought the British pound was weak because of a labor strike, he would short the pound. He was relying on his own human intuition and judgment.
And it completely wrecked him, physically and emotionally.
Oh, yeah.
He later said he felt gut-wrenched. He was constantly getting stomach aches.
Because discretionary trading is inherently irrational, and Simons is a creature of pure logic. When you trade on discretion, you are entirely at the mercy of human emotion.
Right. Fear, greed, political bias, overconfidence, panic.
Simons realized that these emotions were the enemy. He was a geometer. He was a Cold War codebreaker who was used to absolute, undeniable mathematical truths.
And now he was trying to guess what a central bank might do on a Tuesday based on a newspaper headline.
It drove him crazy.
Think about the irony here. A guy who literally mapped multidimensional curved spaces, a guy whose math explains quantum physics, is getting ulcer-inducing anxiety from trading like a regular day trader.
He was completely out of his depth.
So what does this all mean for you and me? Like, what do you do when your absolute certainty is met with catastrophic market failure?
Well, that internal anxiety was validated by actual catastrophic market failure. He eventually brought in some of his old IDA code-breaking colleagues like Leonard Baum and James Axe to help him systematize the trading.
Okay, so trying to use math again.
They tried to build early models, but they still had humans in the loop overriding the system. And it led to disaster.
The 1989 drawdown.
Yes. In 1989, their flagship Medallion fund suffered a massive 30% peak-to-trough drawdown.
Which means they lost almost a third of the entire fund's value in a very short period.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I mean, for a hedge fund, a 30% loss isn't just a bad quarter, it is a death spiral. Investors panic, they pull their money out, margin calls hit, and the firm just collapses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And James Axe, who was running the trading desk at the time, stubbornly wanted to keep trading through the massive losses.
He wanted to hold on.
Axe insisted that the early models accounted for this kind of variance and that they just needed to hold the line.
But Simons couldn't stomach it. He had to physically step in, pull the plug, halt the trading, and literally force Axe out of the firm just to stop the bleeding.
It was a catastrophic failure of their system.
He was supposedly a genius, and the market completely humiliated him.
It did. And you have to rebuild your universe after something like that. But we cannot talk about Simons' dark night of the soul. We cannot understand his psychological need to build a perfect emotionless machine without acknowledging the profound personal tragedies that compounded his life's narrative.
Yeah, this is incredibly heavy, but it is deeply necessary to understand who he was as a human being.
In 1996, his 34-year-old son, Paul, was struck and killed by a car while riding his bicycle.
Oh, man.
It was a senseless, random, devastating accident. And then unimaginably, in 2003, his 24-year-old son, Nicholas, drowned while on a trip to Bali.
I can't even fathom that level of grief. Losing one child is a nightmare. Losing two in separate random accidents is a kind of psychological destruction that breaks people permanently.
They were existential blows. And if we look at how this affected his broader psychology, the profound, senseless loss of his sons, combined with the chaotic, ulcer-inducing terror of the financial markets.
Yeah.
It pushed him further and further away from the fragility of the human experience. He retreated into the sanctuary of pure, emotionless mathematics.
Because math is safe. Math doesn't die in a bicycle accident.
Yeah.
Math doesn't panic during a market crash.
Exactly. Human intuition, human life is fragile, flawed, and unpredictable. It breaks your heart.
Right.
But math is absolute. Math is an anchor. He realized that the human element was the source of all the pain and all the error. He decided he needed to build a perfect, logical universe inside his algorithms.
A universe where rules were obeyed.
Where chaos could be quantified and where the human element was completely eradicated.
And this realization that human intuition is fundamentally flawed and, frankly, just too painful to rely on is what triggers the radical pivot that changes Wall Street forever.
Yes.
He decides to remove humans from the equation entirely.
This is the rise, the breakthrough. Simons knew he needed to go 100% systematic.
No more guessing.
No gut feelings, no more overriding the computer because you read a scary news article or because you have a bad feeling in your stomach. The machine makes the trade, and the human shuts up.
To accomplish this, he makes what I think is his most brilliant, unconventional move.
Oh, the hiring.
Yeah. He doesn't go out and hire hotshot Wall Street traders to fix his fun. He goes to IBM's computational linguistics department.
Right.
He hires speech recognition experts, specifically two guys named Peter Brown and Bob Mercer.
Now, why would a guy running a failing hedge fund hire linguists? It goes right back to the Hidden Markov Models from his Cold War code-breaking days.
Because speech recognition relies on the exact same underlying mathematics.
Exactly.
Break that down for us. How does teaching a computer to understand speech relate to the stock market?
When a computer tries to understand human speech, it isn't actually listening to English words. It doesn't know what a noun or a verb is.
Right, doesn't speak English.
It is analyzing raw sound waves.
Yeah.
It breaks those sound waves down into tiny acoustic slices called phonemes, and it calculates the statistical probability that a certain sound follows another sound.
Give me an example of how the computer figures it out.
If the computer hears a sound that is statistically likely to be a Q, it knows with near absolute mathematical certainty that the next sound is going to be a U.
Oh, sure.
It doesn't know what queen or quack means. It just knows the statistical probability of the sequence.
Right.
If someone says, ice cream, the computer has to use context and probability to decide if they mean ice cream, as in the dessert, or ice cream as in yelling.
It does this purely through math.
Analyzing millions of previous audio clips to find the highest probability of the hidden state, the actual intended word.
And here's where the light bulb goes off. Here's where it gets genuinely thrilling.
Yeah.
Simons, Brown, and Mercer realize that financial market data is just another language. It's just a noisy sequence of data points.
Exactly. They stopped looking at stock prices as representing real-world companies making physical products.
They didn't care if Microsoft was building a new operating system.
They looked at a stock ticker as a noisy language that needed to be translated.
They treated price ticks exactly like phonemes in speech, or exactly like encrypted Russian characters bouncing off the atmosphere.
Precisely. They built what became known as the one model.
The one model.
Before this, quantitative funds usually had a siloed approach. You had a team modeling corn futures and a completely different team with different math modeling the Japanese yen and another team looking at tech stocks.
Everybody in their own little bubble.
Simons threw all of that out. He fed all global asset data, every stock, every bond, every commodity, every currency, into a single, massive, unified algorithm.
So it's no longer about evaluating a business's cash flow. It's pure statistical arbitrage.
They were not trying to predict the future. This is a critical distinction. They were predicting the probability of mean reversion.
Mean reversion. Explain that principle.
Mean reversion is the statistical principle that extreme anomalous price movements tend to reverse back toward their historical average over time.
Okay, like a rubber band.
Think of it exactly like a rubber band. If you stretch two historically correlated stocks far apart, the model calculates the exact tension on that rubber band.
It doesn't care why they diverged.
It just calculates the probability that they will snap back together, and it places a bet on that snap.
Let me give you an analogy for how wild this shift in perspective is. Imagine you are trying to predict the weather.
Yeah.
The traditional way, the Wall Street fundamental way, is to look up at the clouds. You check the barometer, you study the physics of the atmosphere, cold fronts, high-pressure systems. You try to understand the why of the weather.
That's fundamental analysis.
Right. But Simons and his team didn't care about the clouds. They don't care about the cold fronts. Imagine trying to predict the weather by tracking millions of individual raindrops simultaneously.
Wow.
You don't need to know why the rain is falling. You just need to mathematically calculate exactly where the next drop statistically lands based on petabytes of historical data about every raindrop that has ever fallen.
And they had petabytes of data. Decades before the internet was mainstream, decades before big data was a buzzword, they were manually cleaning historical price data going back to the 1700s.
Wait, the 1700s?
Yes. They had people manually entering commodity prices from ancient ledgers.
That is dedication.
And in the modern era, they were collecting intraday TIX prices that changed second by second when everyone else on Wall Street was just looking at the daily closing prices in the newspaper.
They were playing a completely different game.
They were looking for anomalies across milliseconds, up to hours, up to days.
And the results were unprecedented. The Medallion fund started generating those 66% gross annual returns.
Year after year.
And what is completely insane to me is the fee structure he got away with. Traditional hedge funds have a standard model, 2 and 20. They charge a 2% management fee just to hold your money, and they take 20% of the profits they generate.
Simons charge a 5% management fee and 44% of the profits.
44%. That sounds like highway robbery. Why would any investor in the world agree to hand over nearly half of their profits?
Because even after taking nearly half the profits, the net return, the actual money going into the investors' pockets, was still an astonishing 39% every single year.
That's hard to argue with.
If I tell you I can reliably give you 39% a year, you don't care if I'm keeping 44%. You just sign the check.
Yeah, fair enough.
Eventually, the fund was so profitable that Simons kicked all the outside investors out. He returned their money and only allowed his own employees to invest in Medallion because the algorithm couldn't scale infinitely.
But the most mind-blowing statistic in this entire story isn't the 66% gross return. It's not the $100 billion. It's their actual win rate on the trades.
Yes. Their win rate on trades was barely over 50%, 50.75% to be exact.
Wait, really? 50.75%?
Yeah.
That is barely better than a coin flip. How on earth do you build a $100 billion empire when you are wrong 49.25% of the time?
Because of the law of large numbers and absolute rock-solid emotionless discipline.
Explain that.
If you have a 50.75% edge and you make 3 trades a year based on human discretion, you might lose all your money. Variance will kill you.
Right.
But if you make hundreds of thousands of trades a day, automated by computers that never panic, never sweat, and never second-guess themselves, that microscopic edge compounds into an absolute fortune.
It's the casino.
Exactly.
The house edge in roulette or blackjack is tiny, just a couple of percentage points. But because millions of hands are played, the casino always builds a billion-dollar hotel. Simons just applied the casino edge to global finance.
Exactly. But to build this perfect emotionless machine, Simons had to assemble what sounds like the most eccentric, unusual group of human beings ever gathered in one corporate office.
Which brings us to the hidden quirks and the fascinating culture inside Renaissance technologies.
Oh, it was unique.
First of all, they were headquartered out in East Seneca on Long Island, which is a sleepy town far, far away from the culture and the noise of Wall Street.
And Jim Simons himself set the tone. He was incredibly quirky.
Tell me about it.
He was a billionaire who chain-smoked Merit cigarettes constantly. He smoked during intense, high-stakes meetings. He smoked in places you definitely weren't supposed to smoke.
Just a cloud of smoke following him everywhere.
And he absolutely refused to wear socks.
No socks.
Almost never. He was a geometer at heart. Comfort and functionality matter more than social convention. Why wear a tube of fabric on your foot if it doesn't serve a mathematical purpose?
I love that. So practical. But the most significant quirk, the one that really drove the culture, was his hiring policy. He explicitly, categorically banned hiring Wall Street MBAs.
Right. If you went to Wharton or Harvard Business School and you spent your life dreaming of being a master of the universe trader, Renaissance would just throw your resume in the trash.
Why? Why ignore the people who are specifically trained to do the job?
Because Simons firmly believed that Wall Street experience corrupted your thinking. It filled your head with fundamental narratives, economic theories, and biases.
Like trying to find the why.
Exactly. A Wall Street guy wants to know why a stock is moving. Simons wanted scientists who would ignore the narrative and just trust the raw data. He opted exclusively for astrophysicists, string theorists, statisticians, and cryptographers.
There is this quote from Simons that perfectly encapsulates this philosophy. He's like, I don't know why the planets orbit the sun. That doesn't mean I can't predict them.
It's the ultimate rejection of the why. It didn't matter why a signal existed in the market. If it was statistically robust in backtesting, they traded it.
The why was irrelevant.
And in fact, searching for the why was dangerous because it introduced human bias.
But while the algorithms themselves were mathematically harmonious and pure, the human element inside the firm was intensely polarized. And the contrast here is staggering.
The political dichotomy at the leadership level of Renaissance was, frankly, extreme.
And just to be incredibly clear to you listening right now, we're not taking sides here.
Right, exactly. We're not endorsing or condemning either political viewpoint at all. We are strictly reporting the facts from the sources to show the complex human dynamic inside the firm.
Yeah, because on one side you had Jim Simons. He was a massive financial backer of left-wing Democratic politics.
He was a top donor.
Funding super PACs for Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, pouring millions into progressive causes.
And on the exact opposite side of the spectrum, sitting practically down the hall, you had his co-CEO, Robert Mercer.
The speech recognition expert from IBM.
Exactly. Mercer was a monumental funder of right-wing conservative politics. He was the primary financial force behind Breitbart News, he funded Cambridge Analytica, and he was absolutely instrumental in bankrolling Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign.
Mercer even placed his associates, Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway, into the Trump campaign structure.
So you have the two leaders of the most secretive, successful hedge fund in the world, utilizing their immense, algorithmically generated wealth to fund the two most diametrically opposed political movements in modern American history.
Which naturally makes you wonder, how on earth did a firm survive that? How does a company built on absolute mathematical harmony not tear itself apart with that kind of intense, real-world ideological friction in the C-suite?
It survived because the math was the ultimate arbiter. Inside the firm, it didn't matter who you voted for.
Right.
It didn't matter what you believed about tax policy or foreign relations. If your code improved the algorithm's win rate by 0.1%, your code went live. Ideas trumped egos.
The scientific method was the only religion inside the building.
Basically, yeah.
But it also goes to show that while their algorithms could perfectly predict the probability of a stock movement in a vacuum, the firm still existed in the real world. They still had to navigate the messy, chaotic reality of human beliefs, human politics, and human laws.
And human laws eventually caught up to them in a massive way. The IRS knocked on their door.
Yeah, the tax dispute. This is where the black box meets the federal government. What exactly happened here?
Well, for years, Renaissance used highly complex financial instruments called basket options. They set these up through major banks like Barclays and Deutsche Bank.
Okay, basket options. Break down the mechanics of this because it sounds like a loophole.
Essentially, Renaissance would put a basket of securities into an account at a bank. The bank technically owned the assets, but Renaissance controlled the trading inside the basket.
Got it.
The Medallion algorithm would execute thousands of rapid short-term trades inside this basket option every single day.
Right, because high-frequency trading means holding things for minutes or hours, not years.
Exactly. Normally, short-term trading profits are taxed as ordinary income, which can be around a 44% tax rate.
Okay.
But because Renaissance structured this as a single option that they held for more than a year, they claimed that all the profits generated inside the basket should be taxed as long-term capital gains, which are taxed at a much lower rate, closer to 23%.
Wait, so they are making millions of microsecond trades, but claiming it's one single long-term investment.
Yes.
And when you are making billions of dollars a year, the difference between 44% and 23% in taxes is astronomical. It's billions of dollars in savings.
The IRS argued that this was a complex ruse specifically designed to avoid short-term taxes.
Yeah.
They argued that Renaissance was the true owner of the assets and should pay the short-term rate.
Makes sense from their perspective.
It led to one of the largest tax disputes in history. Ultimately, after years of intense legal battles, Simons, Mercer, and other Renaissance executives agreed to a staggering $7 billion tax settlement with the IRS in 2021.
$7 billion.
Simons personally paid hundreds of millions of dollars in back taxes.
$7 billion. But the fact that they could just write a check for $7 billion and the firm keeps humming along just shows how absurdly profitable they were.
It really does.
Still, it proves that the real world applies, even to the Medallion Fund.
Which leads us to the final chapter of this incredible life. Having conquered the ultimate puzzle of global finance, having amassed a personal fortune estimated at $30 billion, and having revolutionized an entire global industry, Simons faced an existential question.
When you have solved the market, when you have beaten the game and made billions, what is left to conquer?
For Simons, who officially retired from day-to-day operations at Renaissance in 2009, the answer was returning to his very first love. The pure, unfiltered mysteries of the universe. The same curiosity that made him wonder about the gas tank at 4 years old.
He dedicated his final years and billions of dollars of his personal wealth to the Simons Foundation. And what I find fascinating is that he didn't just donate money to get his name on the side of a hospital wing or an art museum like a lot of billionaires do.
No, he funded deep, fundamental science. Science that might take decades or even centuries to yield tangible fruit.
Right.
He poured hundreds of millions into autism research through the Simons Foundation Autism Research Initiative, trying to map the complex genetics of the disorder.
That's huge.
He created the Math for America initiative, paying massive stipends to recruit and retain highly qualified math teachers in public schools.
He established the Flatiron Institute in New York, which is an entire organization dedicated purely to computational science, using algorithms to solve biological and astronomical problems.
And perhaps most poetically, he funded the Simons Observatory.
Tell me about that.
This is a massive, cutting-edge telescope project located in the Atacama Desert in Chile, one of the driest, clearest places on Earth. Its primary mission is to study the cosmic microwave background, the residual heat left over from the Big Bang. He literally funded the machinery designed to reach a definitive mathematical answer on the origins of the universe.
It's the ultimate full circle. He spent his life using math to predict human markets, to extract signal from the noise of human greed, and he spent his final years using his wealth to fund the math that will explain the cosmos itself.
It's a beautiful legacy. Jim Simons passed away in May 2024 at the age of 86.
His legacy is profound. It's not just the money. He proved his ultimate belief that the universe, no matter how chaotic, how painful, or how noisy it appears, is fundamentally discoverable if you have the right tools, the right math, and the patience to look for the hidden patterns.
Exactly. The patterns are always there.
And that brings us right back to you listening to this. The greatest investor in human history didn't succeed by having a crystal ball. He didn't succeed by perfectly predicting the future every single time.
Not at all.
And he certainly didn't do it by following the crowd, listening to Wall Street narratives, or trading on his gut feelings. He succeeded by embracing a 50.75% win rate.
Just a tiny edge.
So what if your ultimate success doesn't require being right all the time? What if it doesn't require a perfect narrative? What if it just requires finding your own unique edge, trusting your process over your emotions, and having the sheer stubbornness to let the math play out over the long run? Next time you face a chaotic, terrifying situation, whether it's in your career, your finances, or your life, ask yourself, are you getting lost in the stormy noise of human emotion? Or are you looking for the hidden signal?